Hello, I am back for my biannual YouTube video, and today we're going to be discussing The Flash. Now, this movie has been in the works for over a decade, and it's had arguably one of the most troubled productions in movie history, honestly. A Flash movie has been in development since the 1980s, but this one was announced back in 2014. I think it was a week after the Flash pilot came out, which is absolutely insane to even think about, that there was 9 whole seasons of the TV show before this movie even came out. And this movie has undergone significant rewrites from writers such as Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who wrote and directed Across the Snyderverse, which is absolutely incredible, by the way. Check it out if you haven't already. As well as Rick Famuyiwa, I really apologise for the mispronunciation there. John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. Christopher Hudson ended up writing the actual movie. And even Ezra Miller themselves wrote an actual draft for the movie, alongside comic writer Grant Morrison. It's had multiple directors attached to the project, and multiple directors have even denied doing it. For example, I think Ben Affleck denied doing it, Jordan Peele denied it. A lot going on there. A lot just leaving after creative differences. There's been multiple delays as a result of the pandemic and VFX delays, scheduling conflicts with Fantastic Beasts, and of course the infamous controversy regarding Ezra Miller, kidnapping children and putting them in houses with guns and stuff, and throwing chairs in pubs and destroying someone's neck or something, or the choking thing in Iceland, or being charged with felony burglary and second-degree assault, grooming young children, all this stuff. Eventually, somehow, this whole thing came together, and in the last week, as I've recorded this YouTube video, Flash has finally come out in cinemas, and so it is time to discuss it and say whether or not it was worth the wait. Let's do this. Here we go.
It's not Clark.
My name is Kara.
I'm Barry. We're Barry.
Now I want to start off this review just by quickly talking about what The Flash means to me and why this review might be a little bit biased. I'm going to fully admit that because I love The Flash. The Flash is, as I'm sure you can tell, my favorite superhero of all time. If anyone asks me, it's The Flash. It's the only really comic series that I've actually read, Flash Rebirth. As you can tell, I've got probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Flash pop vinyls, as well as all the Arrowverse and stuff. The Flash is basically what got me into loving superheroes and DC Comics so much. Basically, I made a deal with a friend where if I watched The Flash, he would watch Stranger Things, and I watched it and fell in love with it immediately. The first season is just absolutely incredible, and I followed it ever since, since 2018. I haven't not fully caught up on season 9, I'll admit, even though it's finished, but I don't really care, to be honest. I've kind of dropped out in the last few years, but I have pretty much followed it this entire time. I've met some of my closest friends on Discord, and I've formed these communities, watching all this YouTubers and stuff. It's what got me into doing reviews, all this stuff. The Flash basically means an absolute lot to me. This movie was definitely my most anticipated movie for the year, just because I've been waiting for it for so long, and all the trailers looked absolutely incredible. And I was just really excited for the actual movie to come out. So that's just the backstory. So let's actually get on to what I thought of the movie after watching it. And obviously this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie, then please do yourself a favor and go watch it and come back. Or if you have seen the movie or just don't care about spoilers, then continue watching. With any further ado, let's just get started with the first section in this video, which is the good stuff. Here we go. Okay, now I think this movie absolutely works best when it focuses on the Flash. Wow, what a shocker. When it's a Flash movie and it focuses on the Flash, it's great. But that's the thing, is that this movie doesn't really focus on what a Flash story is. But what I do love about this movie, because this is a positive section, is that it does follow aspects of Barry's life, at least towards the start and the end, which definitely made me feel like this was a Flash movie, with just a shit ton of other elements that weren't needed. But we'll get to that. For example, at the very start of the movie, we see Barry exploring, his CSI work. We see his court case with Henry, obviously, towards the end of the movie as well. We see the relationship with Iris, and he's flirting with her, and Iris, Kiersey, Clemons, she was really good in this movie. That whole relationship, all these aspects of who Barry is and why he's fighting for justice, which is the death of his mother, and the legal system wrongfully imprisoning his father, all that sort of stuff. That is who the Flash is to me, and this movie does show that, although not to the extent of which I wanted it to, but it does show it in some capacity. And I think when the movie does show that, it is really, really good, and I think if they made the whole movie focusing on Barry and Barry's story, it would be so much better. But yeah, that aspect I really, really loved. This movie also can get emotional at times. Obviously, it is following the story of someone who literally has their mum murdered at 10 years old, and then the legal system is corrupt and thinks that it's his father that actually murdered her, and then he's taken away and basically stripped of his entire childhood. And that does take a toll on someone. I mean, not from experience, thankfully. I mean, that carries with him his whole life. and he always has that remorse. Then when he finds out that there's ability to time travel, he does that, and then eventually he has to accept that his mum is truly dead, and by trying to save her and by holding on to the past, you know, he's damaging the whole timeline, he's damaging the world, and eventually he has to accept that and move on, which you know, is the story of Flashpoint. We saw it in season 3 of the Flash, we see it in the Flashpoint Paradox, we see it in the comics, but yeah, this movie does show that. But I'll admit, like in that scene at the end of the movie when he takes the soup can out of the trolley and puts it back onto the shelf, which eventually like leads to like, you know, a ricochet effect, because like that eventually kills his mum because his dad doesn't go back to the store to get it, and then she's not by herself, and then all that sort of stuff. I thought that was really smart, by the way, how they did that. I mean, we heard the leaks back in like late 2020, late 2021 about like that whole soup stuff. I already knew all that, but I just really thought it was cool how it was done. And so it didn't actually show like her dying like it did in the season 2 finale, I think, of The Flash. And obviously, I love that scene, don't get me wrong. I think the way that they did it in the movie, though, with that soup basically symbolizing what's going to happen to her, I really thought that was emotional, and I didn't cry, but I was definitely moved having to say goodbye to your mother for the better of society. I mean, if you look like Across the Snyderverse, literally the most recent movie which just came out also kind of explored the same idea of having to, you know, truly accept that someone's going to die or will die, and otherwise that's a canon event, and otherwise it's going to like have a significant effect on the rest of the world. It is a very common superhero trope. We see like almost every single superhero movie, like No Way Home, all that sort of stuff. With great power comes great responsibility. So it's not like it's anything unique, but I still really enjoyed it in this movie. Yeah, as I said, Barry does go through a good journey in the movie. He sees the alternate Barry. A lot of people said he's annoying, but I didn't really find him annoying because I felt him to be like the mirror to the old Barry, because Barry kind of sees what everyone thought of him in looking at his past self, if that makes sense. And so the whole sort of like plot is about him trying to like grow and move on, and I think by having his past stuff in it, he's able to see, oh wow, I really am annoying and talk too much, and I'm very impatient and impulsive, I need to just like calm down. So I think that's what they were trying to do with the character. I didn't mind him, I didn't necessarily love him either, but yeah, I think that Barry does go on a really good journey. But of course, again, as I said before, this is probably me just being biased just because it's my favorite superhero of all time, and I think anytime I get to see this character in live action, or just in general, and just, yeah, biased. But anyways, Star Labs, biased. I think the cast in this movie is really, really good. I think a lot of the cast doesn't really get much of an opportunity to show their true potential. I think Sasha Calle was really good in the few scenes that she was in. I was actually really surprised she was barely in it as much as I thought she would be. I think Kiersey Clemons was really good. I actually think Ezra did a good job, as much as like we could shit talk them in real life. I'm not talking about their controversies, I'm talking about like their performance in the movie. And I think Ezra did a really good job with what they were given. And you know, they had to play 3 separate characters and make them all very unique. And I think that was very effective in this movie. It's just a shame that they had to go do what they did, because otherwise I would say I'm looking forward to seeing more of them potentially in the DCEU, because James Gunn seems to like, you know, this portrayal of the Flash, but obviously that's not going to be happening. Honestly, I'm not going to say obviously, because who knows with DC? Who knows? I think Barbara Machete said something like, depending on the box office of this movie, like we'll see how it goes, whether or not we do a Flash sequel. Surely no one in their right mind would approve of a sequel to this movie, especially with the box office statistics. It's like the lowest second week drop in history of superhero movies or something, which is not deserved in my opinion at all. Regardless, I don't think that we're going to get a second movie, but I would still be interested in seeing more of this Flash if it wasn't for everything else surrounding it. And also, just the final thing in this category, I think the movie is very fast-paced and it keeps you engaged the entire movie. Admittedly, I did fall asleep a little bit in the third act, but I think regardless, I think it's more of just me being tired and also just like disengaging from the thing. But that's not a fault on the movie, that's just me. But I think the movie is really fast-paced and keeps you engaged, and that's what I really enjoyed about it. Unfortunately, that is all that I have in this section. So we're going to move on to the next 2 sections. And the next one is the mixed stuff, things that I neither liked nor disliked in this movie. Here we go. Okay, now the first thing in this category, there's only 2 things in this category. And the first thing is that obviously at the very start of the movie, we get Ben Affleck's Batman back. Not this one, because Warner Brothers just hates him for no reason. But we got this one back. In this reasonably cool action sequence at the start of the movie, which pretty much was fully spoiled in promotions, but anyways, and like set photos and stuff. The only reason it's in this category, and just the Wonder Woman cameo as well, and even the Aquaman cameo at the end, it doesn't add anything to the movie. Even though it's a Flash movie, I feel like it still could have elevated the movie if they actually like had some sort of meaningful impact, or the scenes were just something really cool and really unique with Batman or Wonder Woman that we'd never seen before. It was the same things. It was just a random motorbike chase scene, Same sort of dialogue I feel like we've heard Batman say before, like, the scars make you who you are. But then he contradicts himself by saying, the scars make you who you are, but don't let them define you. So should we, like, focus on the scars or not? I think what he's trying to say is accept the past, but don't let it define your future, but it wasn't really made clear. Regardless, nothing really stood out to me, which sucks because this is the last time we're going to see Ben Affleck's Batman. I mean, I think he might have filmed Aquaman 2 scenes, but then who knows if Warner Brothers is going to cut that or whatever. I literally said to my friend in the movie when Ben Affleck's Batman drove away, oh, Bruce, I was like, that's literally us saying goodbye to Ben Affleck right now, and I feel like I've felt nothing from that. And I just think it was really cool seeing this version of the Justice League together, admittedly without Cyborg and Aquaman, and Superman, of course, but it's cool seeing them together, but they're not needed, and if they had to be included, at least do something meaningful with them. And there also are some decent action sequences in this movie, particularly with the Flash's running, but the thing that holds it back from being in the good stuff is not necessarily Andy's fault, but the visual effects. I think I said this in my Black Adam review. I was like, the story's good and stuff, like, that's the priority. Visual effects come second or third. Unfortunately, because this movie is just so CGI heavy, when we do have cool action sequences, like when the Flash first time travels and stuff, which is awesome in theory, and I mean, I think the direction is really good. It's just like the actual visual effects and compositions of the shot really distract you. At the start of the movie, there's this really cool action sequence where he's just running through like the entire world, running on water, running through caves. I think the Grand Canyon makes an appearance, all this sort of stuff. He's just running, which is awesome. But it literally looks like they just took a PNG, stuck it in the middle of a frame, just like shrunk it all the way, and then just like used like stick figure just to do this. And also like just the way in which he's running fast, but then the world's slowing around him is kind of throwing you off. Yeah, the actual action sequences could have added something really great to this movie if it wasn't for the CGI really impacting it. But that's all in the sections. Let's move on to the final section, which is the bad stuff. Here we go. Okay, my main criticism with this movie, people are just going to say CGI, which is 100% valid. We're going to get to that, which I kind of already touched on. But my main criticism is, I think I said at the start, this movie detracts too much from Barry. The thing that really disappoints me with this movie is that there was potential. I saw the potential in the first act. I mean, I was engaged throughout the entire thing, but especially in that opening act when it focused on my favorite superhero character. And unfortunately, there's just too much of just stuff that's in here, and it's like, why? Obviously, we know why. Money. Because it's Batman. Probably. Okay, I don't really have a problem with Flashpoint being the first movie for The Flash, which is a hot take, because I know people are like, oh, they should have done this in the third movie. I think we know this version of Barry, so it's not like it's an origin movie. We've seen him in multiple movies, and so I don't think an origin story was needed. I just wish we got more focus on Barry in the Flashpoint story. Whether that be Reverse Flash, instead of there being literally no villain whatsoever. Okay, there is the Dark Flash, but he's in it for, what, 5 minutes? Not even. There was no clarification as to who actually killed Barry's mum, other than, like, interviews saying it was Reverse Flash. It's like, okay, but at least, like, if you're not going to include him, at least reference that and focus on that element of it more, which they didn't do at all. And just the inclusion of Supergirl and Michael Keaton in general, I just don't get why. I know they're trying to show a universe in which everything is different, and I totally get that. But there are ways in which they could have done that without having to incorporate Batman and make the whole second and third act about him. Even just like changing different aspects in Barry's life. For example, I mean, I think as much as people hate on Flash Season 3, Episode 1, Flashpoint, I think they did a really good job of showing Barry's life, you know, being changed because of something he did, and having to experience that life for an extended period of time, rather than relying on like pointless cameos from around the world to show that like the world is truly different. I mean, I know that there was, I think, Felicity or someone in Episode 1, and obviously the criticism that like it's only one episode, which is a different story. But I think that they could have still done that in this movie without having to include Michael Keaton or even Supergirl, or even having to focus for like solid 20 to 30 minutes on the General Zod scene. Again, another pointless thing. Didn't need that. I just think that there was something a lot more interesting they could have done. Whether they're having to be Reverse Flash being in the past, then Barry has to fight him, has to like, I don't know, just experience life with a mother, and then eventually realize that like everyone that he's loved along the way is just slowly disappearing or something because of what he did. Something like that would have made this movie so much better. I think Michael Keaton was cool in this movie. I definitely think he doesn't look like a fragile old man like people were describing. Love his suit. He had some cool action sequences, I'll admit that, like when he first jumps down and stuff. But also a lot of it is just nostalgia bait. Like when he says, let's get nuts, or I'm Batman. Like all this stuff is like, okay, am I supposed to like cry over this? Or is it just here just for the sake of it, just for nostalgia? I just didn't feel anything, and I was disappointed with the creative decisions to include them. But when it did focus on Barry, as I said earlier on, it was really good. But even then, there were so many aspects of the Barry part which was just weird. And it kind of, parts of it was like, has Barry even like grown over the course of like the DCEU as a superhero? DCEU, sorry. Like that opening scene with, him saving the babies. It was just weird. That's the only way I can describe it. It was just weird. He's putting babies, he's putting babies in microwave, even though that Twitter scene is like in reverse. He literally has to put babies in microwave. I swear it was like 5 minutes of just trying to rescue little kids, stop them from falling into potholes, and making it seem like it should be a challenge for him, which it's not. Like, he's literally run the speed of sound. Why is this supposed to be a challenge for him? Obviously, the visual effects, terrible. It was just a weird scene, and they should have done more to show Barry at his peak in comparison with, like, annoying Barry. That's the other way I can describe him. Annoying. And Supergirl. Supergirl was another character. Again, I think Sasha Calle did a really good job with what she was given, but I mean, I don't think you needed her at all, but if you were going to include her, at least do more with her. That seems to be my general consensus of this movie, is just, I don't personally agree with what they chose to include, but if they had to include these characters for Warner Brothers or for whatever reason or for their own creative decisions, at least do something meaningful with them. But personally, in the ideal world, this movie was just a Flash movie. And yeah, as I touched on before, I think Dark Flash was a weird choice for this movie, who just commits suicide in the third act for like no reason. I get what they were doing when they were showing, I am a creation of your failures, because, in saving your mother, you go on to be like, I can't remember the justification for how Dark Flash was created, but I remember that annoying Flash goes on to become Dark Flash, and eventually he just kills annoying Flash and then just dies. And Barry's like, oh, now I know to go back in time and like stop this from happening. What? I did not like that, but I think Ezra did a really good job with that character. Even just the design of it was terrible. I think it was trying to be like what Avatar was in season 3. Failed miserably, to be honest. Or even just rogues. Like Captain Cold, Grodd, I can't speak. Captain Cold or Grodd would have been like really cool characters in this movie. Or literally anyone, Golden Glider or Captain Boomerang, anyone. Just not this. Just not this story. Hello, it's Jordan from A Few Days Later. Now, upon editing this, I realized that I never actually really talked about the elephant in the room regarding this movie. Obviously, the controversies regarding Ezra is like a big part of it, but then the other part of it is the cameos, specifically Christopher Reeve, Reeve, George Clooney, like all these big cameos, and I somehow just completely forgot about all of them. So I'm going to briefly discuss it right now, and obviously the absence of Gustin. So, regarding the cameos, I guess I do share the same sort of stance on it as everybody else. I think it is very morally wrong to use CGI to revive dead people. I mean, technically, yes, like their estate did give consent to it, so there's nothing really technically wrong with it. I just think ethically it's still wrong to use CGI to revive people who aren't actually alive to consent to it. Especially if you consider George Reeves. And if you read his Wikipedia page, like, he basically, Superman kind of killed him in a way because it killed his career, because he was typecasted, and then he basically couldn't get a job, and then felt really depressed and literally committed suicide. And bringing that back in this movie just feels really weird. I get what they were trying to do by incorporating these cameos. They were trying to pay respect to like the legacy of DC, especially Superman and Batman. I don't really think that Andy Muschietti had any bad intentions behind it, especially considering I think he said that Christopher Reeve was like his favorite superhero of all time or something. I know that the intention was there. I just think still there's a question of morality at stake. And I think that they definitely dropped the ball there. Some of the other cameos, though, I will admit, were pretty cool. Seeing Nicolas Cage, who is alive, and he's able to consent to this. Seeing him actually like have a cameo as Superman because his movie got cancelled all those years ago was really cool. As well as seeing Helen Slater back, even though they didn't really do anything. None of these cameos served a real significant purpose other than to show other worlds collapsing. But like, they're kind of pointless. And they don't really do anything. It's literally just like a 30-second shot of Christopher Reeve going, look, I'm Christopher Reeve. Like, that's literally it. And then there's the J. Garrick cameo, who I definitely thought was Katie Sears, and I was like, at least they're, somewhat hinting towards the Flash movie being connected to the TV show. But then it turns out it was just a CGI model that looks identical to him, which is kind of hilarious. You've also got Adam West, and then of course you've got George Clooney at the end of the movie. And by the stage he came out of that limousine, I was just like, I felt numb. I didn't feel anything. It was so weirded out by the movie. By that point into the movie, I was just like, yeah, whatever. This is just how it's going to end, whatever. I mean, I know Grace Randolph reported that rumor a few years ago, or a few months ago. And I was expecting it to be like a lie, because it's Grace Randolph, but like, it was true. I mean, even though they're rebooting the universe and it's going to be DCEU, I still would have liked some closure, determining that everything was kind of like came together at the end with Ben Affleck being back. at the end of the movie, and then that's kind of like putting a closure on that sort of franchise. But instead, they just erased Ben Affleck's character in general, and they also just killed off Michael Keaton and Supergirl in this movie as well. And there's no real significant consequences regarding that. I get what they're trying to do is also like it just prove to Barry that like he needs to like, move forward because you're killing these people, but it's just like, this is Michael Keaton here, and the deaths are also pretty stupid too. I mean, mind you, it's not necessarily the exact same Michael Keaton as the original movies, but still, like, yeah. And that ending was just so weird, seeing George Clooney. I like the F-bomb, that was hilarious. And then lastly, I want to talk about, before going back to my past self, was the absence of Grant Gustin, which is another major talking point. As a massive Grant Gustin fan, I think he's born to play the role. We're going to have a hot take right now. I think that this movie didn't need the cameo of Grant Gustin, nor did it really need any of these cameos, to be honest. They don't really enhance the actual quality of the movie. They just enhance my enjoyment. While from a personal perspective, I would have loved to have seen Grant Gustin in this movie. It would have been the perfect homage to the 9 years of TV that has come before it. You know, Grant Gustin deserves to have his role portrayed on the big screen because, you know, he's really underrated. I mean, just the show catches so much flack that so often people just kind of forget that Grant Gustin is carrying the show. And Grant Gustin is just the best person to play this role, better than Ezra 100%. And so obviously, having in this movie would have made me as a personal fan so excited. But it didn't need to happen. And the second thing I also wanted to say is that I feel like Crisis on Infinite Earths kind of paid homage to all the TV stuff that came before it. You know, with the Batman 1966 show, with Titans, Doom Patrol, Stargirl, Smallville, all those sort of cameos. And this movie with like the past versions of Superman and Batman mainly were paying homage to the movies. And I say paying homage in quotations because it's not really. I mean, you can argue, yes, Ezra was in Crisis, but I feel like it was just one scene just to show that, yes, they are connected. But the majority of Crisis is just spent on TV cameos, except Brandon Routh, but that doesn't really count because he's a TV actor and they just kind of like used him again. I mean, obviously I would love to see Grant Gustin, and I would have 100% preferred him over every other cameo in this movie. Genuinely, like, I'd rather have a Flash character in a Flash movie, especially compared to like dead people. But in an ideal world, honestly, none of these cameos are needed, or if they are cameos, at least they serve a purpose in the movie, which they didn't, other than just nostalgia. And, oh look, we're paying homage, but they're not actually. So, yeah, that's just my take. Back to my past self. Enjoy. And also the score is just, I wouldn't say it's bad, it probably shouldn't put it in this category, but it's just average. Nothing stands out. Nothing stands out in terms of the filmmaking either. Direction could be cool in certain scenes, but that's a very small percentage of it. The direction's weird. The lighting is just weird. The only thing I could maybe say is the set. I think the set is really cool with the Batcave. That is awesome. And that was all practical. But everything else is just lackluster. It's just not there for a blockbuster movie like this, which is supposed to be one of the best comic book movies of all time, or the best movie since Dark Knight, all that stuff. I do not see that at all. And the last thing, obviously, I've touched on it enough, but I just have to put in this category. The abysmal CGI. And I don't blame this on Annie Muschietti or the VFX artist, because I think I'll leave a link in the description, but there was this video I was watching today, and it was a VFX worker stating basically, they worked on this movie and stating why the VFX was so bad. It was basically, studios don't care about how good the visual effects look. They only care about the money. They only care about making sure that it's done on time for the shareholders meeting, all that sort of stuff. And you can definitely tell, even though technically this movie had like 2 years to perfect the VFX shots, but obviously can't be done, I guess that soon, because this is the product, this movie. So yeah, that is basically everything I have in the sections. Let's just move on to the final section, which is the conclusion. Here we go. In conclusion, The Flash is a very disappointing movie. There are certainly aspects of the movie which I really loved. I think just being a Flash fan in general, seeing him on the big screen meant a lot to me, and eventually seeing this movie after waiting like 6 years. And so there's obviously going to be some biasness that comes with it, hence the score I'm going to give. But I think when the movie does focus on Barry, it is really, really good. And I really like the aspects that they explore. I really like the cast. And I think even Michael Keaton, they all did a really good job in the movie. But they were either not needed at all, or they just weren't given enough to do. And obviously, the inclusion of these characters in general, yeah, I think it's just rather pointless, and it deters from what a Flash movie with literally the title, The Flash, should be. And that is a Flash story. And it didn't do that. And thus, this movie. CGI was terrible. Nothing really stood out to me, particularly in terms of the actual filmmaking or production elements. However, Barry does go on a journey throughout the movie, but not significant enough to make a real big impact, but there are certainly scenes that did make an impact on me. I still don't think it's a terrible movie. I don't think it's one of the worst DC movies or even worst superhero movies. I certainly don't think it's great either. I just think it's a movie that exists. It's certainly a movie. That's the only way I put it. It's just, it's lackluster. It's not exactly good. It's in the middle. It's very, what is this? Why should I care? But it's not, holy shit, it was terrible. Like, Ant-Man and the Wasp has to be one of the worst superhero movies I've ever seen. Not second one. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, one of the worst ones. That was just, don't get me started on that one. But like, yeah, in comparison to that movie, obviously, this one is significantly better. I think there's just so much worse superhero movies out there now that maybe my bar has just been lowered, that if it surpasses that bar, I'm like, wow, it's actually a good movie. And I think I gave Black Adam too good of a review as well, in retrospect, especially when I said the title was literally, it's restored my faith in DC, and it has not done that at all. It's just an average movie, and therefore it deserves an average score, which is, for me, a 7 out of 10. People say, well, it's actually good. I think an average for me is 6 to 7. 7.5 is just slightly above average. It's good, it's not great. And then 8 onwards is just a great movie. And so this is like somewhere average. Yeah, I have weird feelings on this movie. I need to rewatch it, and maybe my opinions will change. But that's generally what I think of this movie. So let me know in the comments what you think of the movie. If you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. I've got my Obi-Wan review like 75% edited. And the finale was literally like a year ago yesterday, and I was going to put it up May the 4th, and then I procrastinated. I was going to put it up yesterday, and then procrastinated for like the 1 year anniversary, and I just haven't got around to it. And then I've also got my Black Panther Wakanda Forever review, which I filmed, started editing. Maybe you'll post that on Chadwick's anniversary. I have no clue. Maybe we'll never post it. Maybe it'll just be on a USB. Like when I die, people can just be like, oh, what's this? Oh, unreleased Jordan's videos, because people will care. Hopefully I'll get this one up. Fingers crossed. If you're seeing this, just know that it probably took a lot of mental work for me to actually like get myself to edit this. But yeah, that's all I have in this video. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications. Join my Discord server. It's going to be a redevelopment across the next 2 weeks because it's dead. And we're trying to make it a little bit more modern. Obviously, it has been a very Arrowverse-centric superhero now that it's pretty much over. Obviously, we need to do something different. So just join in and give me ideas, and you get to see the development of the server and meet some people. That's how I met these people, through the show, and having shared bonds and shared topics to discuss. But yeah, that's basically all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. My name is Jordan, and I am out. Bye!